It's Friday, January 17th. You're listening to today's episode, the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. American Primeval is a new Western miniseries on Netflix. The first episode takes place between Missouri and Utah in 1857 during the Utah War. Let's talk about the title for a second. American Primeval. Primeval has two definitions. One is earliest ages in the history of the world.
Right.
Do you remember in the early 2000s, maybe it was the late 2000s, right before 2010, there was a show in Britain that was just called Primeval.
No,
it was kind of like La Brea. And these guys found a rift in time and a bunch of scientists went back.
So yeah, it was just like kind of year one.
It was supposed to be like a dinosaur show, but I heard there weren't that many dinosaurs actually in it. It was all about the fauna. The other definition for primeval is based on primitive raw instinct. And that's where I think they've taken the title
Right.
from.
It reminds me of Justified City Primeval.
Exactly. Wild West, war, racism, sexism, murder. There's no safety. In the mid to late 1800s, that 19th century that everybody is afraid of, but yet fascinates Hollywood. So this pilot is 45 minutes long and follows the precarious journey of a woman dragging her 9-year-old son across the country to Utah. When I first heard that she was from Pennsylvania, a little part of me wanted to compare this to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Her life is being turned upside down. She's making her way from Pennsylvania. She got into a little trouble back there. That's the reason she's on the run. She's trying to catch a cab. Instead, it's a wagon. And at this point, she's in Utah.
There's a big difference, though.
Right.
Sarah Rowell, I think that's her name. Rowell, maybe? It's
like Roswell? Yeah, go ahead.
That's her last name. She is an outlaw. I mean, that's the whole entire
so was
point
Will
of why
Smith,
she's trying to
especially
leave.
in the new series.
In the new series, but I thought you were talking about the old series.
His name's not Will Smith in the new series, is it?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, we talked about that.
I forgot about it.
Had you heard of the Mountain Meadows Massacre, though?
A little bit. We'll talk about that in a second, though, because they get there. We've already reached Utah. It seems like the premise of the show has already been got. Like, they're where they need to be. She should be looking for her husband if she hadn't already killed him. They show up with a bunch of Mormons, and just in time to see the Mountain Meadows Massacre, participate in it, actually, which they both survive thanks to one lone wolf guy named Isaac, and played by Taylor Kitsch, right? The fascination with this Oregon Trail time and history, like, I understand it when you're a fourth grader, because it's a lot of fun to play. But Under the Banner of Heaven went through this exact story. Like, they had flashbacks. You saw Joseph Smith, you saw Brigham Young, you saw how the polygamy and the military and how there was just that tension. 1857 is the year it all went down, right before the Civil War, right?
Yeah.
But then you get shows like a few years later, Manhunt, which also talks about how society and the government were not on the best of terms.
Definitely around that same time, yeah.
1883, Godless, Lawman Bass Reeves, Billy the Kid. It feels like American Primeval is like a mishmash of everything we've gotten over the last few years.
Yeah, and just speaking about characters we've seen before, Jim Bridger, he was portrayed by Will Poulter in The Revenant. Brad Pitt's character in Inglourious Basterds plays a direct descendant of him.
He seems like he's a badass. Like, at least from this depiction of him, he comes in there pretty strong. He owns a fort, and someone gets shot in front of him, their guide, Sarah's guide, and he just picks up a shovel and smacks the dude who shot him in the head, and then I think they string him up, and he's just in the background dead.
He was a real...
Not Jim Bridges, but you know.
Yeah, but he was a real-life pioneer who was caught between warring factions, but...
Yeah, but he's also made a career out of it. Like, he built that fort, and he knew that it was going to be in the middle of all this violence, and I guess was very successful in that it didn't get overrun, right?
Yeah.
There's still a memorial to it to this day in Missouri, right? So you look at all these shows, and they always like to bring in people who are real. Like in 1883, it was all about not just John Dutton's family, but they brought in real Civil War people. I think Tom Hanks played one of the generals, right?
Yes, and not only that, though, they always try to mix it with some fiction. I think that's kind of where you're drawing a lot of the comparisons from.
Well, Banner of Heaven was pretty factual.
Right, but that was based on a documentary. But what happened here was, the reason I asked if you heard about the Mountain Meadows Massacre is that's the main draw of the show. Peter Berg, he's someone who has done a ton. Friday Night Lights, this is actually his 5th time working with Taylor Kitsch.
Painkillers.
Painkillers, Battleship, I mean,
And he did the original Friday Night Lights as
Yeah,
well.
so he did the movie and the show, Prime Suspect, The Leftovers, Ballers, Hancock. He's very well known.
But he doesn't do a lot of history stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
Other than, because I'm talking about ancient history, like 1800s.
No,
Yeah.
but what happened was in 2020, he came across an article about the Mountain Meadows Massacre, thought there's a lot here that I didn't know about, decided to call up Mark L. Smith, who worked on The Revenant. And then he didn't know this, but back in 2016, when Mark L. Smith was writing The Revenant, he also wanted to make a pilot series about Jim Bridger in just that time period.
See, so he is a badass. Jim Bridger is a badass. That's what I'm getting from all of this.
But then Peter Berg and him, they were like, you know what, let's try to make this series. And once you have everyone, it kind of makes sense because Peter Berg, again, huge director. They even got the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, Jim Irsay. He made a cameo appearance in this episode as a bathing mountain man.
Yeah, no, I know he's the guy who calls out the knife girl, the girl who steals the knife at the very beginning. Yep. But like that could be a fact on the worst television show of all history, of all time. You know, like that could be the IMDb fact on like Whodunkits, a 2004 miniseries that ran for 2 years, but had the Cowboys owner, Jerry, whatever his name. Yeah, go ahead.
So what about Brigham Young? Let's talk about him for a second. Okay, yeah. Well, there was a rift between him and President James Buchanan, the 15th president.
Buchanan ran on trying to kick out the Mormons.
Yeah, and
because he sensed that there was this slavery issue that was coming down the line, and he thought to himself, well, one way that we can, and I'm not saying that the Mormons had a lot of trouble for a lot of years. People were very against the polygamy thing.
Yes.
And still are. But I think it was only like 1/5 of men who actually practice polygamy in Mormonism. I could be wrong about that. But the point is, yes, it's also called Buchanan's War. It's Utah War. It's, 1857.
And Brigham Young, who was a Utah governor, also the religious leader, he declared martial law over the territory after Buchanan allowed settlers to be allowed through.
I'm sorry, say that again? He allowed settlers. What happened
after Buchanan allowed settlers to be...
there had been a lot of violence before then. They finally got to Utah. He said, Brigham, you're allowed, or I guess the previous president said, Brigham, you are the governor of that area. And so it's this time where there was not a lot of secular politics. It was mixed in with religion. And so he felt, because there was this encroachment from the military as well as blending in with the Native Americans, that didn't go very well either. And so it was just a Wild West scenario of everybody trying to kill everybody at the same time. And as the military got more and more into the, like, we don't want a religion controlling the states, that's when I think Brigham Young started putting down martial law.
Right. And the thing about Brigham Young is he's the antagonist here, and he had some very bad things about him. He was very racist, defiant of the Constitution, abusive towards women. But there was some...
You should hear how the LDS Church still likes to defend him.
There are some good things he did. He bought the telegraph and railroads to Utah. He was also an advocate of education. Historians look at him as kind of neutral. In fact, there's a lot of differing opinions on if the Mountain Meadows Massacre, if he even knew about it, because a lot of people are saying had he known about it, he probably would have stopped it. But here they're saying in the TV series that he was the one to kind of enforce it.
Everybody practices in selective history. But one thing that's not selective is that it took all the way until 2002 before the LDS Church even took responsibility for the Mountain Massacre. And the facts were available pretty soon after. Like, they'd done numerous studies and accounts throughout time. It just took them a hell of a long time. It reminds me a lot of the Pope took so long to accept gay marriage. It's like, come on. You know, why does it take this long?
So out of all the characters that we've kind of talked about so far, which one was your favorite, do you think?
Jim Bridger, or what's his name? Jim Bridger, of course.
Jim Bridger?
Yeah. So we should talk a little bit more about the actual show, because the Mountain Massacre happens so quickly at the end.
But that was the defining feature. Like, that's the thing that made Peter Berg be like, I want to make this series.
And so you'd think that they would have added a little bit more history into their depiction of it, because in this first episode, it's primarily just about Sarah and Devin, the kid.
And both of them are made up. Yeah.
Yeah. And both of them are made up. And it reminds me so much of the 1883 storyline of the family surviving the elements, the bandits, the Indians, the arrows, the scalping. And Godless is also a Netflix series. I think what happened was they saw how well that one went off, how beautiful it was, had a big cast, took place in New Mexico, so really close by, dealt with a single mother with secrets of her own, raising her son, and they make friends with a loner outlaw. Sound familiar? I feel like this show, American Primeval, may be too late to the party. And so Sarah and Devin are leaving Missouri at the beginning of this thing. They're waiting for their guide to bring them to Fort Bridger. Once they get to Fort Bridger, we meet Jim Bridger. Jim Bridger then links them up with Isaac once their first guide gets killed. Isaac says, no way, I don't want any part of this. He's more of a vulture type character where he will follow wagons until they get attacked and steals their supplies and then sell them off somewhere.
Yeah, I just want to kind of talk about Shea Wiggum really fast. I forgot that he is the father of Georgia Wiggum from Ted, who plays Blair in that. But also, I found it funny that Taylor Kitsch, he for so long was like, you know what, I'm not going to go back to Friday Night Lights. And then he said, okay, I will, but I'll only do it for an episode. That came out a couple days ago. But yeah, the person who plays Jim Bridger and Isaac. But yeah.
All right, let's jump to the cast, because instead of finishing up where this story takes us, let me just jump down to my cast notes. So Peter Berg, FNL, Painkillers, Taylor Kitsch, that's his connection. Taylor Kitsch was also in Painkillers, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This is their 5th time working together.
Okay, so I can't name the other 3.
There was Battleship, there was Lone Survivor, and then I think another film.
Lone Survivor?
Yeah, Taylor Kitsch is in that.
No, I'm saying so he plays a loner here. He plays a loner in Terminal List. This is what I want to talk about is Taylor Kitsch's career for a second, because it's not necessarily close to anything that he's done before, except for his character in Waco. So he plays a messianic, I know it's like a messiah type figure, a prophet, a religious leader in Waco, the Branch Davidians. He plays David Koresh. And the whole thing about that is the government coming in, being ultra abrasive and intrusive with the way and manner that they are trying to take down this cult. And that's exactly the way that I feel like they're trying to treat the Brigham Young scenario. Whether or not it's a credible threat, what was going on with the Mormons at that time, it's up for other people to decide. But the Latter-day Saints were being, I guess, infiltrated in their minds by the military in the same way. So it's kind of weird how Taylor Kitsch is playing a completely opposite character than he played in Waco. But Waco, his co-star, was Shea Wiggum. And that's his connection with him. And then in Terminal List, where he's playing more closely related to his character in this, where he's that lone wolf, Isaac, he plays a lone wolf off the grid friend of Chris Pratt, right?
And who is also in Terminal List.
Jai Courtney. Right?
Exactly, and Jai Courtney is here.
And
he's been given 2 tattoos from Margot Robbie in real life.
Yeah, like if it were filling out a map. But this is where it stops, because you got Betty Gilpin from Mrs. Davis. We talked about her a lot in that.
Right.
And then Dane DeHaan. Where did he come from, and how did he end up in this show? He kind of parallels Taylor Kitsch's early 2010s career, where they tried so hard in Hollywood to make him into a star with John Carter and all those other ones. A few years later, Dane DeHaan got A Cure for Wellness, Valerian in the City of 1,000 Planets. A bunch of clunkers. And it's just funny that they're collecting in this one TV
He's
show.
supposed to be, I feel like, he's a made-up character, first off, Jacob Pratt.
Right.
But almost in Friday Night Lights, who is the dad in that again? What's his name?
Kyle Chandler?
He reminds me of Kyle Chandler from Mayor of Kingstown, because I felt like Dane DeHaan, Jacob Pratt, he was just a likable character throughout the whole time. It seems like every single thing
in this episode.
Yes,
he's
in
there
this
for
episode.
5 minutes. We see him for like 5 minutes.
Well, we know he's going to be in more of the series.
Yeah, so his wife at the end of the massacre is kidnapped, and I think the Mormons tell the Paiutes to go have their way with the women, and then kill them. And so she, Abish, who we most recently saw in The Agency, is going to have that reunion. This is where the show gets a little confusing, because they made their way, Sarah and Devin, to Jim Bridger's place, that fort. Jim Bridger says, oh man, you missed the bus. It's going to take a really long time to get there, even with a good guide. And so that's when she tags along with the Mormons, the Abish family, and whoever else is with them. And suddenly they're in Utah. They pull a Daenerys where all the stuff that they were plotting out, the weather, the mountains, the tough terrain, suddenly they're just there.
Yeah.
Not only are they there, but they have a stowaway that only the kid knows about. And I just felt like if the point of this show was to show the distance and how grueling it could be, it failed miserably, because suddenly we're at the bottom part of Utah where this massacre occurred. I didn't even really locate it or realize that it was supposed to be that specific massacre, because it seemed kind of small for what that massacre was supposed to be.
Right,
Does
because
that make sense?
yes, the real event committed by Mormons, as we've talked about, it resulted in around 120 casualties. The event in real life lasted 5 days.
5 days.
Here it lasts 30 minutes.
I honestly
or
have been
maybe
so
not even.
desensitized to all the violence in old westerns that when this happened, I thought it was just a run-of-the-mill normal thing.
That's
Like,
interesting because Peter Berg said that this he felt was the most like visceral, like gruesome thing he's ever filmed.
right, it was. But that's where the desensitization comes into play because we've seen it. In all these other Western things, they get so violent so quickly that if you really, really want to change the way people's perception work, you can't show a girl almost raped at the beginning of the series. You can't show that same girl then murdering someone in cold blood and then having that guy get shot in the first scene. Like, they did it to themselves. If Peter Berg really wanted to direct something where it felt like a substantial, like, oh, this is new, the CGI wasn't bad, but it just felt like there was nothing special that I could not hone myself into those characters enough. They didn't feel important enough. They just felt like fodder.
But didn't it look cool? Like, I mean, it was all one shot.
The only shot that I like continually go back to is the trailer shot where like the cow or the bull just runs right through the wagon while they're sitting underneath it. And in my head, I'm just like, that looks so unrealistic, but the CGI was good.
But there's the specific scene people talk about is the scalping scene. There's articles just written about how they did that. Like, Danny DeHaan had a blood bag in the back of his thing, and then the director had to press a button in order to get the blood exactly right.
This is what I mean by party too late, because in 1883, we saw people actually get scalped. Not like, no, I mean it like they got the full scalping done and they died. Like there was a lady, I think, who was running around in the background until they like shot her because she had her entire skull shown and like there was no coming back from it. She was going to have infection. Like they just, in 1883, they made the violence feel more visceral. Well, in this, it felt like I'd seen it 1,000 times.
It seemed like they were trying to get authentic, though. Like, they actually did shoot in the snowing mountains. It wasn't a soundstage. It was 11,000 feet in the woods that they had marked off in Santa Fe. And then
what did we see in this first episode that had snowy mountains, other than like a quick backflash? Or a forward flash.
I'm just saying that every place that they shot.
But that's my thing. It's like if it was about the journey, if it was the Oregon Trail and we were seeing this in the premiere, I would give them credit for it. But that's not what we saw in the premiere. We saw them jumping locations like crazy. They made it halfway through the U.S. and then they were in Utah, and we just get this last minute fight thing. Dane DeHaan survives. And here we only have 5 more episodes, right?
Yeah.
And they've already set us up with all the storylines they have to get through. A reunion of the stowaway mute girl who runs away at the end. She has to find her way back to the kid and Sarah for it to make sense, right? Isaac begrudgingly putting himself on the line for the lady and the son. Like, you need to see that relationship grow until they all like love each other. You need Jai Courtney to catch up with Sarah at some point.
Virgil Cutter.
Yeah, explain why Sarah was accused for murder. Like, this is all going to come out. Have us sympathize with her character no matter what, because there's no way they're going to just have some terrible person be the main character of the show. And then, of course, you need Jacob's reunion with his wife, Abish. And they only have 5 episodes to accomplish all that. But all of that is pre-written. Like, it's space and time that I already know. And so it feels super predictable. And all I want is something new to look forward to. And all of that is like old stuff, you know, all of that is stuff we've seen in so many other shows.
So it seems like what you're saying is that this pilot just kind of wasted your time because you weren't seeing anything you had seen before.
No, that's too drastic. I'm saying that it set itself up for a lot of meandering at this point, and we only have 5 more episodes. So when it comes to things like, why did Jai Courtney have to have such a long introduction? He could have just been the bounty hunter who got to the fort, was looking for Sarah, and then just went on his happy way, showing that, Bridger wasn't going to give her up easily. That would have been an intriguing plot. But instead, we get like a whole extra 5 minutes of the bounty hunter eating, and then Jai Courtney tricking the bounty hunter. I don't even know how you tricked him. The only thing he did was murder the guy and then leave with a bunch of bandits who he's going to have to split the profit with anyways. What was the point of killing that guy, of killing the bounty hunter?
Yeah, no, I think that it was just supposed to show at the very beginning that
he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
But like, the reason why this girl is wanted is because she's a murderer. And so how is he above getting his own bounty on him now? If anybody spills, he was the last person who saw him. Who knows? Maybe now he's wanted for murder. And furthermore, when they're traveling to Utah, no matter how much they want to downplay how important or difficult that is, having an extra guy who knows how to fight, if you're going to kill the bounty hunter, wait till you've caught her and then do it and then bring her in, Like, why would you do it right at the start?
Yeah.
What did they gain other than a piece of paper with her face on it?
So, I mean, like, you're just saying that, well, I'm trying to, like, kind of summarize your point. Are you saying it wasn't entertaining? Like, what exactly? Because I know that you've said that you
My
didn't see anything
ultimate
new.
rating is this. I went back and forth, but if you haven't seen 1883, if you haven't seen Godless and you haven't seen Banner of Heaven, this premiere is probably somewhere like a 7.5. It's got a good cast. It's got good CGI. And if you're, but for me, it's a 6 because, like I said from the get-go, it's a bunch of mishmash stuff, predictable when you really look at it. And I'm desensitized to the type of violence. When the lady got the arrow through the head, I was like, oh, that's that again. It wasn't one of those, that's the first time I've ever seen that, because she was mid-sentence when she was talking.
Yeah.
I also thought that the history lesson was too vague if you wanted to lean into that route and be like, people will learn something at the same time.
That's what Peter Berg was hoping for.
I know, but like, what did I actually learn? At the very beginning, it said this is 1857. There's the military, the Native Americans, and the Mormons all fighting in Utah. And then at the end, we see the Mormons put this plan together and attack this wagon group and then walk away. I don't feel like I'm getting too much about that historically. I don't know if I was a teacher, if I'd be showing that in the classroom. Now, that's obviously not the reason why a lot of people tune into this anyways, but it's another reason why I just give it a 6 out of 10.
Just some facts I have about when they were filming the Mountain Meadows Massacre. They shot it over 5 days at sunset within an hour window. Also, Peter Berg, he makes a cameo shooting someone off a horse and then he gets shot himself. Now, when it comes to the reviews, it's strange because it's a lot like The Terminalist, and the fact that The Terminalist has 7.9 IMDb, critic score is 40%, and the audience score has been 94%. For this TV series, though, the critic score has been sneaking up this whole entire time, so it's not as big a divide as it was before, but 63%. However, the audience score is an 88%, and it has an 8.2 on IMDb with over 15,000 reviews.
That's very high.
Yeah,
and like I said, for people who haven't been acclimated to those other shows, that would make sense. Like, maybe they've only seen Godless before. Maybe they don't have Paramount Plus.
Well, I think that what you're saying kind of parallels with the Rolling Stone review, because it says Berg's technical flair can't elevate the material, which is so thin it leaves even a cast this talented more than a bit adrift. Also saying the main stories aren't really intertwined that much.
I don't find the story thin. I find the potential for it thin. Where does it go from here? Other than the Sarah and the kid hanging out with Keisha's character, Isaac, what is our motivation forward?
That's also my same question, because this is billed as a limited series at this point. And like I said, it seems like the Mountain Meadows Massacre was the one thing they wanted to film. It seemed like Peter Berg was so intent on just doing that and didn't really have, and I haven't seen the rest of the episode, so I don't know, but doesn't really have a vision past that.
You make it seem like it was invincible. Like, after the first episode,
so because
people were just shocked.
That's the one thing that Peter Berg,
You
like,
said that
when
times.
I'm talking about the articles,
Mhm.
it's all about that one scene.
I think it's because it's honestly the biggest thing that happens in the Utah War. It's so, like, where does it go from here? What else is left? Like, yeah, you're going to get a lot of politics maybe with Brigham Young. And I think, like, the military sends their own dude that they want to take over as governor. But I guess I don't know, man.
So are you going to be watching the rest of the series?
I think I'll jump to the last episode. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that the Native American girl is going to show up again. Isaac is going to be friends with the lady and the kid. Jai Courtney is going to have some interchange. Maybe he'll still be alive. Maybe he would have died in the penultimate episode. Jacob and Abish are going to have a reunion. Whether or not they stay together, someone's got to die, like die. So I think maybe it might be one of them. And then there's an explanation why Sarah has been charged with murder and why she keeps on saying she's going to go see her husband who's already dead. Like, why was she so insistent to go this route? Why, like, she's not Mormon and she's not really, like, the gold rush hasn't happened yet. So other than to escape the law,
I think that was the main thing, though.
But there's other areas she could have gone to, safer areas, places where she could have brought her kid who has a limp. I don't know. Yeah, I like that he was reading Oliver Twist. That was pretty funny because I was like, what did kids do back then? All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode unless you have anything else.
No.
Bye.
Bye.